All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our August 2025 quarterly statewide grant managers group meeting. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Stacy Alice. I'm the manager of the grant unit at the Office of the State Controller. With me is my partner in crime, Gina Salazar Love. Say hi, Gina.
Hello, that's me.
That's you. There we
I'm
go.
more the criminal than the partner, but whatever. No, just kidding. Depends on the day, really.
We're happy to have everybody here today. Looks like we have almost 100 people today. That's awesome. So,
Amazing.
yeah, if you're new here, we do this every quarter, except for the spring quarter when we hold an annual grant summit. But we've been holding these meetings for about 9 years now, so it's a great opportunity to network a little bit, share information that we have coming from not only updates from grant management at the state level, but also at the federal level and how those intersect. So today we're going to start off with updates, and today we actually do not have a formal presentation. We're going to do a bunch of updates, and then we want to have a more of an open discussion regarding kind of the state of federal funding. So we'll get to that here in a little bit. I am going to turn it over to Gina in a second. She's going to start off with our regular Swag Mag updates. The recording will be posted as well as the slides. It usually takes us a couple of days to get those posted on our OSC website. We'll drop the link to our grant website in the chat here in a second, so you can bookmark that. That website's a great resource for not only past slides, meeting recordings, but also a lot of other resource documents that we have compiled over the years. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Gina. If you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, raise your hand, come off mute. We typically schedule 2 hours for this meeting. Sometimes we actually use the entire 2 hours. It just kind of depends. So we'll see where things go today, how much engagement we have, how many questions we have, what the discussion looks like when we get to kind of that open discussion part of today's meeting. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Gina, and I will drop in our website in the chat. So if you do not
Thank
have
you.
that, please bookmark that, and we will go from there. All right, Gina, did I miss anything before I turn it over to you?
No, I will take it over from here.
All right, looks like we have exactly 100 people in here today, which is
This is awesome. We haven't had these numbers
amazing.
since like our first meeting when we had so many people. We had people standing out in the fields. It was kind of weird, but it was fun. It was a lot of fun. So couldn't have booked a smaller room on that day. Anyway. All right. Good morning, everybody. Excited to be here in August. We'll go ahead and get started with some standard Swag Mag updates, and then kick it back over to Stacy, and she'll take care of everything. Let me just go ahead and mute everybody. There we go. So we got some background noise. All right. So first up let's see here. There we go. First up, over the last several months, we've been updating guidance and policy documents with updated uniform guidance information. And while updating the cost allocation and indirect recoveries policy, we noted that the current policy did not directly speak to state-funded grants and was a bit vague in that area. So we created a survey that we sent out a few weeks ago, and we wanted to just get a little bit more information and see if this policy needed to be updated in any way with additional language to address the allowance of negotiated indirect cost rates or de minimis rates for state-funded grants. And thank you so much to the 19 of you that submitted. I know it doesn't sound like a lot, but for us, it's a lot. We take all of these submissions and all of that feedback, and it's been very helpful for us. So we're going to quickly run through the results of this survey. All right, so the first question that we asked was, do you allow subrecipients to use their NICRA or a de minimis rate for all state-funded grant programs or just some? And 42% said they allow NICRAs and or de minimis rate for all of their state-funded programs. with 37% indicating that they allow the use for some of their state-funded grant programs, and 21% indicated that they do not allow the use of a NICRA or de minimis rate for any state grant funds. For those that responded that they do not allow for a NICRA or de minimis rate, we wanted to kind of get a little bit more information about that. And the feedback was a little bit mixed, which is nice because it gave us some good insight into what is taking place. So I summarized the feedback kind of to keep the information anonymous. Some of the feedback indicated that some state-funded programs are exploring an across the board 15% de minimis rate, while others were not truly familiar with an indirect cost rate through their agency. But it's important to note here that even within agency, things are managed differently. So from one office to another office, one office may have full understanding of what a NICRA is or an indirect cost rate is. Others may not. And it's just kind of it just varies from office to office, agency to agency. And then as you'll notice here, the third comment indicates the reason why they don't allow a NICRA, but they do offer a de minimis rate to ensure that the grant funds are kind of focused more on the project and outcome than focused on the administration of the grant, but still acknowledging that administration is necessary in order to manage grants. All right. So going back to the initial question, those that responded that they are always or sometimes allow indirect cost rates, we asked a couple of follow-up question, asking if allowing subrecipients to use the NICRA or de minimis rate was determined by legislation, a department policy, or even both. 60% indicated that both legislation and department policy determines whether or not they allow subrecipients to use an indirect cost rate. Well, 20% of them said they have a department policy, and roughly 13% say that the legislation really drives the decision on whether or not to allow an indirect cost rate. We did have one response to the other category. And with the follow-up feedback that we received from that, they indicated that if legislation requires it, that they use the indirect cost rate. They'll allow that to happen. Other than that, they don't have department policy in place or anything. So that's one thing to kind of keep in mind. And did see the question here, Marcy. You are correct. We will get that presentation sent out, and it'll be posted online after this meeting as well as the video. And it's kind of hard to believe that we are at capacity. I am so sorry. So sorry about that. We do have a limit, unfortunately, on our Zoom. We're working on fixing that, but okay, so getting back to the survey. Let's see here. Let me go to the next question on that. All right, so the next question we asked for additional feedback on the use of a NICRA or de minimis rate to capture the indirect cost. And again, it was mixed. This is some additional information that we received, but again, it's mixed. Let's see here. In some cases, what is best practice in this case when an entity has demonstrated that communicating with their federal entity but not getting a response was one of the questions that we got. And I think it's really important to address that because there are circumstances where they have a NICRA, and then they apply for a new NICRA in the middle of the process. And so really what we ask for you to do, and really 2 CFR 200 says that they can use a de minimis rate if they're in the middle of negotiating, if they don't have an exact rate. Sometimes it happens in the middle. So we'll just, so it just kind of depends, but definitely, if they are working with their federal entity, you want to make sure that you're allowing them to at least use that NICRA at a minimum. All right, let's go to the next. This is some additional feedback that was provided to us with some takeaways that will help us to further improve upon our policy. Some additional feedback provided that agencies are seeing the indirect cost requirements in legislation, and that really helps drive the decision on whether or not they're going to use it or not. But at a minimum, they are allowing a de minimis rate. So that's kind of the general consensus when it comes to the feedback. Okay, so as for next steps with all of the feedback and information we received, the OSC will be meeting again internally to discuss the results and that feedback in the next couple of weeks. And based on the feedback, There will most likely be changes to the policy. Once those changes have been made, the state controller will release the updated policy for review by everyone. And as you know, we do send that out via our Swag Mag newsletter as well, so that we can get that feedback. Any additional updates may be made after that point, and then the final updated policy will be posted to the OSC website. Any questions about the NICRA before we move on, or this survey?
Gina, I have a quick question for you.
Yes.
You just mentioned in that instance where an organization has applied for renewal and they haven't heard back, that we can instead defer to use the de minimis rate. It was my
Correct.
understanding that previously 2 CFR 200 said that if you've ever had a NICRA, you're ineligible to use the de minimis rate. Did that change in the most recent 2 CFR?
Yes, ma'am.
It
It
did.
did.
It
It
did,
did
Natalie.
change.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually a common question that we get, especially when we talk about the NICRA, because it is, they have changed that to say that you can do the de minimis regardless if they've had one in the past or not. So it's just kind of one of those things that they said, okay, we need to change this and make it allowable. So yeah, they can use their de minimis.
Yeah,
And
so
that
if you,
changed back in October, or October 1st, 2024 was when that came into effect, Christine. I'm sorry, did you have something else on that, Stacy?
no, I'm
Okay.
good. Thanks.
All right. Any other questions? All right. All right. So just a couple of minutes. We're gonna take a couple of minutes on the OSC grant agreements. So the DPA accessibility team, and I know you all are sick of hearing about the accessibility on these grant agreements and all the other things, but this is all good work that we are doing because it's going to be helpful to so many people to allow them to be able to have better access to all of our tools and things like that on our website. But it's been a lot of work, and because um these documents in particular are live documents, meaning they're Word documents that you're just pulling down, they're not PDF'd. There's a lot of extra remediation that has to happen, and sometimes when another agency draws it down from our website, then it has to then when you do that, it loses some of the accessibility. It changes because there's different versions. So our DPS, or not DPS, our DPA accessibility team took over our grant agreement and modification tools templates, and then they sent them out to a third-party vendor so that we can ensure that we had true accessibility. Again, since they are live Word documents versus an accessible PDF. Excuse me. The vendor did the same work for the CCU unit. So you'll start to see that in some of our contracts as well. But we wanted to just make sure that everything was fully compliant. Now, with that being said, there were some additional modifications made to the grant agreement, the intergovernmental agreement, the interagency, the model small dollar template, and then the grant amendment assignment and the option letter. Option letter is actually not that one. I just removed and it's not on there, and as well as the assignment, those were not modified. But a couple of weeks ago, we sent out an announcement with a new policy regarding the accessibility, and because of that policy, the accessibility language was either updated or drafter's notes was added. So I'm going to go through each one of the documents and just kind of tell you where this is at. So with the grant agreement, the first noted change is to T, which is under the general provisions section, and it's on indemnification. So that's going to be, again, under general provisions, T, indemnification, and it's going to be subsection IV or Roman numeral 4. The original language was changed to the following language, and language was also changed for line V, which was accessibility. And then they added the subsections I and or little I and double I. So as you can see, there's a little bit of a change here. It's not drastic. It's just saying basically that contractors also need to ensure that they are also using accessible documents with anybody that they're working with. So anything that follows after that needs to be accessible as well. All right. So a again, on the grant agreement, here's two drafters notes that were added, both to the same sections that I mentioned before. And they just kind of go over and explain in a little bit more detail what each of those are. For the intergovernmental grant agreement, it was K, letter K under the general provision section again. Accessibility was updated to remove the previous language and replace it with the language listed here and the accompanying drafter's notes, which again is on the second page here. So this one adds actually 3 drafter's notes because again, this is intergovernmental and this is dealing with local units of government, which is really what's most affected. If you read the HB, I think it's HB 25, or yeah, 2511-24 is what this kind of come down to. And so that included basically all local governments. All right. So the interagency grant agreement added section E, which is accessibility, and then added the 2 drafters notes that you see on here as well. So again, you can see the language is very similar from document to document. It's just the locations are different. And then the small dollar grant agreement, section 39 was deleted and rewritten with the language above. So it was a little bit smaller before, didn't have as much language. This is a little bit more specific again to contractors, subrecipients, those types of things. All right, and then now on the grant amendment, there's only a drafter's note in that. So so this is basically saying that if you're amending the grant agreement, you need to ensure that section 17T, IV, and 17V of the grant agreement templates have the applicable language. And so you just want to make sure that that's taken care of, or if there's any changes that's noted in here as well. All right. So the grant agreement will go through some additional language updates over the next several weeks, so be on the lookout for those changes. But any updates or changes to the grant agreement templates and tools will be noted in the crosswalk of changes link that we have on the grant agreement and modification tools page. So again, that if you go to the grants website, you can go up there and you can click on the procurement and then go to the CCU website and you'll see all the contracts and grant tools there. And we have a separate section for just the grants as well. So you'll see all of those there. I did want to share a quick little note in regards to the tribal grant agreement. Stacy and a member of the CCU are currently working really diligently with the 2 tribal nations to update that language in the tribal grant agreement. And it's to conform with the uniform guidance changes that came into effect back in October 1st of 2024. And as we all know, it's not always easy. It's not always an easy process to get through because, again, they are sovereign nations and they just have different rules and requirements. And so, like I said, Stacy and Melissa from the CCU have been working diligently with them to get those taken care of and rounded out. So stay tuned for that. Once that's posted, we will let everybody know via the SWGMG newsletter. Again, we'll send out any updates to any of the documents at that time via SWGMG.
Can
Any
I just
questions?
add one more
Yes,
thing on that?
absolutely.
Gina? So yeah, I mean, I honestly thought we would have the tribal update done, but we hit a last minute snag, which I believe will be cleared up here in the next few days. So Gina's correct. We'll make sure we announce that. In the meantime, if you're issuing any grants right now, just continue to use the one that is current on our website. That is the most recently approved version. So please use that. Do not send, absolutely do not send agreements to the tribes that are on anything except for the OSC approved tribal grant agreement templates. They will not accept them. We have worked for years to get those agreements in place. So you have to use those tribal grant agreement templates. All right, Gina, back to you.
I've been talking this whole time. My apologies. So, yes, Nelly, the the link as I was responding to your question without you hearing me, but that the link is on the website. But this is what the crosswalk looks like. As you can see, it's got a tool. I mean, it's got tabs on the bottom here that you can click on based on each one of the modification tools, small dollar grant award, SLFRF grant agreement templates, those types of things. But Stacy is very
Yeah.
diligent in making sure that we have all of that information right there.
Well, actually, Stacy was just going to confess that she has not made the updates to
Stacy.
just the accessibility things that you just went over. That just changed last week. So I
Yes,
will
that
be
did.
doing that in the next couple of days. But outside of that, yes, I am usually very diligent in updating that crosswalk. So
Exactly.
yeah, so those the things that Gina just went through on the previous slides on the accessibility, that'll show up here in this crosswalk. And just make sure you're on the right tab. I made a tab for each one of our templates, and then obviously the very last tab on that crosswalk is the tribal template, and that one will be updated once we get across the finish line as well.
Perfect. Thank you, ma'am. All right, let's move on to our policy and guidance updates. So, we have a newish type policy. Actually, this new policy accompanies or really adds to the accessibility policy that was established in the fall of last year. The updated portion states that all contractors, subrecipients that are public entities, and public entities under CRS 2434-301 means a state or local government or any department, agency, special district, or other instrumentally or other yeah, I don't know why that says instrumentally of a state or local government, but yeah, so that's what that means. But you also must ensure that that they are in compliance with this policy. More information can be found on our website or in our SWGMag update email from August 12th. So we did put some more information out there when that policy was released. The conflict of interest policy is also undergoing some revisions. The procurement team in our office has been working with Bob Jaros, the state controller, to get this policy up to date. Stacy, would you like to share any information about the pending updates?
Yeah, absolutely. This one has taken, not surprisingly, way longer than we intended for it to take. The current conflict of interest policy is really kind of procurement centric. And so we took a look at it and said, okay, we need to expand this a little bit to include some very specific and more targeted information related to grants, and started doing that. Thought it was going to be honestly a quick and dirty little update, and it really morphed into something that has now included um, much more involvement and feedback from the SPCO, the State Procurement Officials Office, so Sherry Maxwell and her team. We've had to loop in the state HR person because it has some implications there. There were a couple of other areas since the procurement rules changed several years ago. There's also been a couple of other minor changes that we needed to address, all of which we, kind of when I went into this thinking, oh, hey, I just need to add a couple of little lines that say, okay, for grants, do this, and make sure when you've got grant review committees and boards, make sure they're signing conflict of interest forms. It has just morphed into something that has kind of taken a life of its own on. And so it has, kind of towards the end of the fiscal year, honestly fell on the back burner. So we have kicked up those efforts again, and are meeting again internally, and hopefully we will have a draft to share in the coming weeks. So apologies on that, because I honestly thought this was going to be done like 4 months ago. And
As with everything we do, we think it's going to be simple.
right. I mean, I guess that's the kind of the downside of being an oversight agency,
Right.
where, we're everything we do, we have to keep in mind of how it impacts all the agencies and stuff. Whereas like if you're in your department and you're managing a singular program, it's a lot easier to get things done. But when you have to think about kind of global impacts across the entire state structure, and we have to take into account obviously state statutes and things like that. Yeah, I guess I shouldn't be surprised at this point, like
Right.
almost 29 years into state employment, that things like
Yeah.
this kind of take forever. But yeah, I mean, honestly thought this was going to be an easy one. And I did think, um, Allie, there was going to be a low hanging fruit. So,
Yes. Yeah,
yeah,
that was
so,
crazy.
yeah, so stay tuned on that. Although,
Alright.
I mean, Gina's about to tell you about two things that we have gotten across finish line, which is,
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
which
Thank
is
you,
exciting.
Susie.
Yeah.
Yes, we have also updated some of the OSC guidance documents, such as the OSC Guide to Monitoring Subrecipients and the OSC Guide for State Agency Compliance with the OMB Uniform Guidance. These two documents were really, the updates were issued due to the changes in the uniform guidance as well. The OSC OMB Subrecipient Guidance, the Procurement Edition. Updates are coming soon on that one, so be on the lookout for that one as well. But these first two that we have listed here with the links, those are ready to go. I did want to show you one of the things that we have that has been an ongoing change with the accessibility is the way that we are presenting our documents or our policies. I'll click on one real quick. As you can see here, it used to go to a PDF version. Now it's an HTML page, which does look really nice. I like the way that it looks. So now you can see our policies and our guidance documents in this fashion.
Makes for some very long scrolling though.
It does. It does.
But
And
I do think they look better.
they do look a lot better. I don't know how well they print. I haven't tried one yet, but there might need to be a little bit manipulation or so, but there it's coming up. So, all right. One more note. Yeah, so because of accessibility and updates required for our grant tools and documents, we have been working with our DPA accessibility team to recreate the SLFRF subrecipient closeout checklist. A standard of this closeout checklist is also in the works, but the risk assessment tool and the subrecipient versus contractor determination tool. These tools will now be easy to fill out forms that walk you through the questions and provide additional questions based on some of the answers. So it's very similar to what the original tools were doing, except these will be fully accessible and easy to use. So basically, it's just going to ask you a question. You're going to click yes or no, or just respond. It's going to send you to the next question. It's just going to make it an easy to fill out, and the flow is really nice. They don't need to be downloaded. It can simply be bookmarked from our page and used at any time. Once the forms are complete, they are complete. I should say that they are complete. We're just waiting for some final approval on them in order to post them on the web. But the other nice thing about this is once you've completed the forms, you're given the option to print or save it. So you can print it, you can save a copy to your hard drive, whatever the case may be. And then on one of the documents, you're also able to include backup documentation. So that's kind of cool. So we'll ask you at the very end, do you want to save this? And if you want to save it, do you want to add any additional documents to it? And you can load the documents in there. It's kind of a slick tool that's been created. And so those will be rolling out as soon as we can get those approved by Bob. Then we will go ahead and get those posted on our website and again announce them on the Swag Mag newsletter.
They look so
Oh,
good.
they're
Like,
so much, and they're
yeah,
fun too. It's kind of
yeah.
neat. It's not looking at that same ugly tool that, somebody may have typed some information into. So now you have another agency's information. It's completely, you don't have to download. It's just easy. So,
And
um,
especially like on the sorry, Gina, on the subrecipient versus contractor tool, we made sure that all of the kind of the formatting behind the scenes. So depending on how you answer a question, that will tell you if it's a subrecipient or contractor. All of that is working fabulously. So
Yeah, it's
all of that
great.
logic is working. It looks great. You know, the risk assessment form looks fabulous. I think they're gonna, you know, I'm excited for everybody to have them available and start using them.
Me too. And really the forms, I mean, it's going to be a little bit of a shift because they are different. We're used to just having this form that we could just print off and fill out or having something that we can just fill out right on our computer. You still have that possibility. It's just you don't have to download things and you just go in there. And Margaret, I see your question and where are the responses recorded? The cool thing about this is, again, at the end, it'll ask you if you want to print it or if you want to save it to your drive. So you can do one of those two things or both. So that's where the responses get recorded, is basically in that system. Now you don't, now the only way you can keep those, because they just kind of clear everything out afterwards, but the only way that you can keep that information is to either save or to print it. Kind of similar to what we have now. All right. Any additional questions on those? All right. All right. So the grant manager 101. So as you know, we've been talking about this for a while, but we have started our planning and working on the rewrite of the grant manager 101 training. We are going to be expanding on all of our topics. They're going to kind of blow them out a little bit, add a little bit more detail to them, because it's, you know, when we are doing the training, we're able to have the conversations and kind of expand on things a little bit more. But we're not going to be able to have that conversation now because it's all going to be kind of on a learning management platform. And so you'll just be able to go through and so we'll be expanding on those topics. We're also going to add a couple of additional topics. First one being indirect cost rates. We'll probably have additional information on some new policies that will be coming out, or just additional policy information. And there will also be increased effort to include state-funded grant requirements where applicable. We've heard you loud and clear. This training is because the majority of our funding coming to the state is federal funding, and kind of the framework for grants in the state of Colorado is based off of the 2 CFR 200. We follow that framework. So that's why we really speak to more federal grants. But what we're really trying to make an effort is to make sure that we are including where it's specific to state funded grants, or if it's not at all applicable to state funded grants, we'll note that as well. So you will see those things kind of mixed in there where applicable. Let's see here. Okay, so on our little timeline here, so that's what we started doing. We in July we began the planning and the work. We did a lot of that stuff. This month we discontinued the department specific grant manager 101. So last September 25th was our last open Grant Manager 101 session. And then we switched over to just doing department specific ones. And we've had a great outturn. We've trained several agencies. It's been wonderful. We've done some in-person, we've done virtual training, but it's been really good. We are discontinuing that just so that we can focus more on just recreating this training, so that we can get that out and back on the streets, but in that LMS platform. So if you missed out on it, we're sorry, but it will be coming soon. We do have a final, well, we have one more training coming up at the very first part of September, and then our final one is at in the middle of, or no, at the beginning of October. And those will be the last two trainings that we will be doing in person or virtually, I should say. As we move into September, we'll just continue working on reformatting the content again, because it's a lot of work to get everything reformatted. Stacy and I kind of have been secluding ourselves so that we can just dedicate all this time to just making sure we get this done. So that'll be helpful. We're working on identifying the actual LMS platform that is really kind of universal to all agencies, because we want this to be available to anybody who wants to use it, and not just executive branch departments, those types of things. Because we acknowledge that we have other departments out there who are still following and using grants and doing what they need to do with grants, but they don't have the backup support because they're not part of the executive branch. They always have the support from our office regardless, but they're just not, they don't have the same level of access, I should say, that we would at the executive level. So we're working on making sure that we have an LMS platform that really works for that. Then we're also going to start, working on our launch date so that we can start to get a really good idea of when is this going to happen. So that's what we're going to be doing in September also, is just kind of seeing if we can pinpoint a day or a specific month, I should say. And as you can see here at the bottom, I've gone lofty. I've said we are launching the GMS, I'm not GMS, the GM 101 LMS training in January. Again, this is my goal that I set in my own head, and I wanted to put it on paper or at least on screen. But we still have the months of October and December to kind of work through the remainder of the reworked materials. And then, based on the guidance that we get from our LMS manager, we're really going to be able to start putting these things in, work on some quizzes and things like that so that you can transfer from one section to the next. So we're really excited about this. And then coming up in November when we have our next SWGMG meeting, we'll have more information and so stay tuned. But we're really excited about this. It's a big project, but we're excited to get it off the ground.
Can I add one other thing, Gina?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so one of the things we're really trying to move towards and really hope to get to at some point is, some kind of certification process here for
Yeah.
grant managers in our state agencies, whereas, maybe it starts out as, an internal department policy where if you're managing grants, regardless of in what capacity, you have to go through Grant Manager 101. Ideally, I would love for it to be kind of a state certification thing that's coming out of the OSC saying you have to do that. But we're looking into that, baby steps on that. Obviously, the most important thing is just to get the thing rewritten and get it transition to an actual LMS. But that's a long-term goal we have.
Yeah.
We
That would
are
be
grant nerds.
ideal. We
Yeah.
are nerds.
Yeah.
All right. Any questions about the Grant Manager 101? All right. I'm going to move on to it's happening. Yep, that's right. It's happening. The Grant Manager, no, not Grant Manager, Grant Accounting 101 is coming. So, we don't have a ton of information on this, but this is going to be it's happening now. We've dusted off the slide deck. We're hoping to be able to release this sometime shortly after we release the Grant Manager 101. We're going to be sending out the current slide deck that we have. Like I said, we just dusted it off. And we're going to send it out to be reviewed by some accounting staff at a couple of different agencies that have offered to assist us. And then we also have somebody that's on our core team that's really going to be able to help us kind of pinpoint and make sure that we have all the actual core pieces that are needed. So we're really excited about this. I know this is something we've been talking about for a while and it hasn't been able to come to fruition. A lot of things have taken place between then and now. And so we're at a point where we're just like, okay, things have slowed down with pandemic. The SLF are starting to slow down a little bit. So now we're able to focus our time and energy back to the Grant Accounting 101. So please stay tuned for that. And as always, we will be providing all updates and everything on that as we are moving closer to that being launched on an LMS platform as well. All right. Okay, Stacy, I'm going to pass this over to you so that you can go over some SLFRF updates.
All right, thanks, Gina. Last call for any questions on anything Gina has walked through, and I echo everything she just said. I mean, we've had these things on our roadmap for a long time, and the pandemic had other ideas.
As it
And
did for
so,
everybody. It just
yeah,
up
exactly.
complete upheaval.
So, everything that we had on the roadmap prior to, I don't know, March of what, 20, 20? Was that when it was?
Yeah.
2020?
Yeah.
Yeah.
2020. Yeah.
Yeah, just kind of ground to an absolute standstill. So, a lot of what Gina and I are going to be focusing on in this next year and a half is obviously, as I segue into SLFRF updates, closing out SLFRF, but we're at that point, like Gina mentioned, where we actually have time now to get back to the things that are really important to us. Not saying that SLFRF is not important, because it obviously is. It's $4 billion worth of important stuff. But you know, we had a lot on our roadmap prior to the pandemic that we were super excited about. We know that there are resources on our roadmap and ideas on our roadmap that we've wanted to develop and make available to everybody. So we're really excited to get back to work on those things, and things like those web forms and things like that that are just kind of going to make life easier. And we're working on, you know, standardizing a bunch of other things that, you know, can be standard examples and samples of forms and things like that. So I think we have a lot of exciting things on the plate for the next year to year and a half.
Absolutely. Cannot wait.
Yeah, me either. All right. I don't see any questions, so we're gonna kind of move forward. I'm gonna give you quick SLFRF updates, and then we'll kind of get to the main topic of discussion and some updates about federal funding. So, SLFRF. Gina, can you, because I don't have slide control. Oh, there actually it just popped up. Okay, so whatever you did finally worked. Excellent. All right. All right, so just the numbers. So exciting news. So we have fully obligated the $3.8 billion in change, which is excellent. We had to have that obligated by the end of the last calendar year. We are at about between 96 and 97% spent on our SLFRF. So we have roughly about 113 million or so left to spend. We have until December 31st of 26, so that's roughly, what is that, 16 months or so to spend that. So this is I know a lot of you are managing SLFRF or have SLFRF projects in your department. This is a friendly reminder to make sure you reach out to the OSC and or your strategy officer dedicated to your department if your project is not going to spend all of its obligated dollars, because we have the flexibility under Treasury guidelines and Treasury FAQs, that we've got some instances where we can reallocate the money. So obviously we're fully obligated. We would like to fully spend SLFRF. So that is something that the OSC and the Office of Federal Funds and Strategic Initiatives, or OFSI, which is where the strategy officers sit. We're all watching all of that very carefully. So, but if you believe you're not going to spend everything, let us know, obviously sooner than later. All right, some general updates. Every year, the state is required to submit an annual performance plan for SLFRF. So I put a link there. That was submitted at the end of July. We went through and, you know, obviously the governor's office, the OSC, OFSI are all closely monitoring all of the projects. You know, there's about 253 projects overall for SLFRF, and about 90, I think it's about 98 of them close all the way at the very end. So, you know, that's a lot. That's about a third of them. So this is just a friendly reminder, if your project has completed spending, even if the closeout date is not until, you know, the very end, we can start that closeout process early, and that would obviously be something we would absolutely want to do now rather than have to wait until the very end. So, you know, I have somebody on my team, Jessica Snyder, who is managing the department closeout process and knows all the end dates of all of those projects. But if you're in an agency or if you have a colleague in an agency that is managing a project, um, and it has an end date of 12/31/26, but you happen to know that they've completed spending, please reach out to us, and we will initiate that department closeout process early. We're trying to keep an eye on that. And, obviously, the governor's office is keeping an eye on that too. So, we'd like to close out anything early if we can. That'll really help us out on the back end. And then just a note that our department closeout process is not the same as the governor's office final performance narrative. That final performance narrative piece still has to be done no matter what. So, whoa, Gina, what's happening? All right, there we go. Okay, my slides were moving all right.
That was me. I
So,
accidentally hit the screen. Sorry.
okay, thanks. I was like, what is happening? All right, because we have a lot of projects closing out between now and obviously the end of the SLFRF period of performance, which is 12/31 and 26. We're going to start doing quarterly department closeout refresher training. So we've done these trainings a couple of times back a year and a half ago or so, a year ago, a little over a year ago when we first rolled out that process. We've done it a couple of times since then, but we're going to start doing it on a quarterly basis to obviously give people that information, do that refresher training, but also encourage departments if they've got those projects that are done spending and are actually done working that we can close those out earlier. So we have not selected dates yet. We're looking, I think, late October, early November. So we'll be sharing that information out during our SLFRF office hours. Which the next one will be September 18th. You'll see that on the bottom bullet down there. For a while, we started out office hours. They were quarterly. We went to monthly for a very long time because a lot of things were happening. We've since backed off on that. We're now doing quarterly. So the next one will be on September 18th at 3. And last thing I want to mention, we've had some questions lately about SLFRF and single audits and the refinance. And so just want to clear some things up here. So if you've got subrecipients that spend $1 million or more in SLFRF, they're obviously subject to the single audit requirements under 2 CFR 200. However, if they've got $1 million that were granted to them, but it's been refinanced and they are no longer spending over $1 million, they are not subject to single audit, but they're probably subject to either a performance or financial audit coming out of the state auditor's office. So we put a link here to some state auditor FAQs, especially when we're talking about units of government, like nonprofits and stuff. So just more to come on that. We'll talk more about that, I think, probably at our September 18th office hours. All right, and Gina, I lost slide control again. Thanks. All right. Final SLFRF updates for me. I always like to give people an update on what's going on with KPMG activities. So we have 2 departments that did not get SLFRF funding right away. They got it a little bit later, so they've been 1 round behind us on our monitoring activities. And so those 2 agencies, we are just beginning our transaction monitoring, which occurred for the other 20 plus agencies about a year ago. So we are in the process of doing that. We've asked for general ledgers. We're in the process of identifying specific transactions, and that monitoring will begin shortly for those 2 agencies. The round 3 risk assessment work is wrapping up. Draft reports have been sent to all departments. I think we have 18 of them, 17 or 18 of them that have been finalized, and another 3 or 4 that are in the final stages of being final. So we're wrapping up round 3. Round 3 was a look back of our round 1 activities where we were looking at department capability and things like compliance with 2 CFR 200 and looking at department policies and procedures and things like that. So what we were really looking for in round 3 is if departments implemented the recommendations from round 1 to improve their their documentation, their policies and procedures, things like that. This entire KPMG engagement has been focused on making sure that the state as a whole is audit ready. We got almost $4 billion worth of funding. It's a lot of money. It's going to be highly scrutinized. And so we want to make sure that, we're in a good position when, auditors show up. So wrapping up those activities, new activities will be kicking off soon. Probably the thing that I'm most excited for is a few months ago, well, actually starting a year ago, we did a series of 4 different trainings led by KPMG in partnership with the OSC for people managing SLFRF projects in the departments. And we did several days over the course of a few months. We looked at duplication of benefits. We looked at fund use documentation. We went through 2 days, 2+ days of subrecipient management, and we spent a couple of days talking about anti-fraud, waste, and abuse framework. So a lot of the feedback we got was, because these were the people that were actively managing projects, SLFRF projects, and a lot of the feedback we got was, this would be great for leadership. And one of the reasons we did these trainings was obviously to focus on SLFRF, but a lot of the things that we were training on over the course of those several days across those 4 different workshops was really future-proofing our grant managers and our grant staff in our state agencies for any pot of money. So anything that we talked about, except for a couple of very specific SLFRF targeted discussions, could be applied to any kind of grant funding that you manage. And so we took those comments very seriously. To be honest with you, this is something that Gina and I have struggled with for a long time. Something that was on our roadmap before the pandemic was how do we let department leadership and senior leadership know about some of these really critical topics related to grant management? And so one of the things that we're going to be doing is we're going to be kicking off a senior leadership training. And being led by KPMG in partnership with the OSC, we'll be doing an hour with executive directors and deputy EDs. Hopefully sometime in the next 2 months. We're trying to get that scheduled. And then we will go on a department by department basis, whereas the department deputy executive director most likely will identify senior leadership within their agency that need to come to this training. So it'll be 5 hours. It'll be much, shorter than the several days we did with the grant staff, but it will give them an overview of all of the topics we covered, and we'll be prioritizing the most important topics under each one of those modules. So super excited about that. We're hoping to start those individual department trainings in November. And like I said, it'll be 5 hours total across all 4 of those topics. So more to come on that. We'll start scheduling departments out in the coming weeks. A couple of other activities we're going to be working on. We're doing some closeout readiness similar to when we asked KPMG to help us with doing kind of simulated desk reviews and things like that with the coronavirus relief funds, which was prior to SLFRF. So we're going to be doing some closeout readiness activities related to that, just to make sure that the OSC is ready for audit, because the money came to the OSC. So the OSC is responsible for $3.8 billion. We want to make sure we have everything we need. You know, we have the department closeout piece, which is the departments closing out their singular projects. And, you know, we need to make sure there are no gaps. So we're going to start running some simulated targeted work there to make sure that we've got what we need in hopes of passing an audit with flying colors. And then some additional work. We've had unfortunately, several instances of suspected fraud with SLFRF. So we've asked KPMG to, you know, kind of be on call for some fraud investigation support, which has been fantastic. They've been able to dig in and do things that we just have not been able to do, either because we don't have the experience to do it, or we just don't have the bandwidth and to do it. So that's something that's really exciting. All right, I think that's it for SLFRF updates. Like I said, our next office hours is September 18th, so we will give more information then. All right, Gina.
Alrighty.
Okay.
There we go.
All right, thank you. All right, so we're going to shift gears now, and this is going to be kind of what we're going to talk about for the rest of our time together. I'm going to go through and talk about some updates, and then we'll have time for an open discussion. So we are going to start with the thing that I am least excited about, which is potential changes to the uniform guidance again. So next slide, Gina. All right, so obviously there's been a lot of changes over the last 7 months with the new administration in DC. A lot of things have been changing rapidly in the world of grants management. There are rumored changes regarding more updates to the uniform guidance, likely by the end of the calendar year. You know, so you know, it's taken us a few months to kind of acclimate to the major changes that happened in October of 24, and we're likely to have more changes coming our way. So the biggest one is going to be around indirect costs. That one we know for a fact. There are rumors of other things, although you know, there are several national organizations that have been pressing the Office of Management and Budget, OMB, for an idea of what those additional changes may be, and they're not getting a lot out of them. So we know for a fact they keep mentioning indirect costs. So there's probably going to be a shift to indirect costs again. So as soon as we know more, you'll know more. So we're keeping an eye on it. There are a lot of, like I mentioned, a lot of national organizations that are also keeping an eye on it. So the other thing that a lot of national organizations are keeping an eye on is every year OMB issues a compliance supplement that usually happens in May. It has yet to happen for this year. So if you're an auditor or you do audit work for your agency, you know that the compliance supplement is a really critical tool. It's a critical tool for auditors as well as entities that get audited because it provides the auditors with the audit objectives, the suggested procedures. It really narrows the compliance supplement's been around since the uniform guidance you know, came into fruition about since, I don't know, when was it, 2014? But the compliance supplement really narrows what auditors can look for. So each federal agency each year identifies all of their programs, their federal programs, and then they go through and they identify which of the 6 out of the 12 compliance requirements that can be looked at in that audit year for that program. So it's a really important tool. So here we are towards the end of August, and it still has not been published, which is really, you know, putting auditors in a bind because we're getting to that point where audits have to happen. It's vital to the timely submission of single audits. So I know that the National Association of State Comptrollers, issued a joint memo to OMB last week expressing their concern over the delay and asking them to release it right away. So, as soon as we know when that's going to happen, we will communicate that out to everyone as well. All right, let's go to the next slide, Gina. All right, some of you may, we want to take a minute and talk about a training that was hosted by the AG's office. So this occurred in early summer, like May, June-ish. And some of you may have taken that training. This training is related to reviewing federal agreements, certifications, and acknowledgements. It's intended for those within the state agencies that have signatory delegation only. So if you have delegated authority to sign federal awards, you have to go through this training. So we are partnering with the AG's office, the OSC is, and we're going to be holding those trainings twice a year. So we're in the process right now. Like I mentioned, the first round happened in early summer. Everybody went through it. We're going to start offering it again here very soon. So it'll happen twice a year. What that training is, it's really focusing on our department review of terms and conditions of our federal awards, because those are changing all the time. There's a lot of things happening with federal awards. So really focusing on knowing what you're signing, what you're agreeing to, taking a look to make sure that the terms and conditions are things that we can agree to as state agencies, ensuring that future compliance isn't going to be an issue. There's a lot of new certifications flying around, and those certifications can be at the time of application, at award, at drawdown, making sure that we can, if we're signing those certifications, that we're okay to do that. And so really overall, that training is providing departments with tips to identify these somewhat problematic provisions, and elevate those provisions. There are a lot of provisions related to, immigration, DEI, references to specific federal executive orders, clawback provisions. And so helping our signatory delegates in our agencies understand what those provisions are. If they look problematic, what do we do about it? Determining next steps, probably going to involve, going to the governor's office as well as the AG's office. So the bottom line with those trainings really is following the breadcrumbs and, following the different breadcrumbs they're giving you from the time they're announcing federal funds through awards, if terms and conditions are changing, and reviewing those to identify if, we're going to have potential issues if we actually sign a federal award. So really important. With that being said, we'll keep everybody posted as to when the trainings will get posted or will get scheduled. And if you're somebody in your agency that has that delegation to sign a federal award and you haven't gone through that training, make sure you go through that. So more on that to come. All right. Let's see, changing grant landscape. So we know at the end of July that there were some federal funds that had been previously frozen. Those were starting to get released. So those were funds related to some education programs, different social programs, literacy programs. So things are starting to loosen up a little bit, and may or may not be related to a lot of federal litigation that's happening. There are some new attestations that are starting to show up. So this kind of goes back to the previous slide about knowing what you're signing. These attestations can show up on new awards, renewals, continuation awards, anywhere and everywhere. We know that there's going to be increased federal monitoring, both on a programmatic and financial standpoint, as well as could be, increased audits as well. So, there's this entire changing landscape right now around grants and accountability. And we're going to talk here in a second about the latest executive order that came out just a few days ago and why all of this is important. But kind of the overall theme here is there's a lot of scrutiny right now on grant funding, and we need to be prepared for that. All right, let's go to, I got a couple of slides here. There's a lot on these slides. There was an executive order that was issued by the president on August 7th. It was called Improving Oversight of Federal Grant Making. So there was a lot there. They issued this executive order that seemingly shifts the way federal financial assistance and grants are handled. So it kind of at its core shifts grants to more of a political oversight, and we'll go through each one of these and I'll explain what I mean there, and kind of away from the way grants have been administered in the past by, civil service, federal employees that are designing programs, implementing programs, administering programs at the federal level. There have been a lot of executive orders that have been issued in the last 7 months. Executive orders are directives. They're not law. They're obviously issued by the president to the federal agencies, and really it's telling the federal agencies how federal programs are going to be administered. They set the expectations for the federal agencies on how they're going to implement, how they should implement their programs, and how they're going to enact their priorities. So, and obviously that's going to filter down to us as recipients of federal funding. The executive orders can change administrative requirements, set new priorities, influence everything from reporting to documentation, monitoring, all of those things can happen at any time, as we're seeing. These executive orders get issued and it could change the game midway. So if you've got awards that you've had or you've recently signed, this executive order, comes down the pipe and things could change midstream. So really important to understand this. It really kind of overarching, the executive order basically is, directing federal agencies to enact the president's priorities, and really it's less now about the federal agency's statutory mission or programmatic objectives. So that's a huge shift. So as we kind of run down this, like I mentioned, it's reshaping federal funding and how we administer priorities. This third bullet is really key. So senior political appointees now must review and approve all notice of funding awards, so the NOFAs, as well as awards. So that third and that fourth bullet are really kind of key here, because peer reviews have obviously been a huge part of discretionary funding in the past. There's always peer reviews. It's redefining the role of the peer reviewers. The senior political appointees in every agency don't have to rely on peer reviews anymore. That's a massive shift. Because basically peer reviews are at this point optional, and the political appointees don't have to defer to the peer review decisions. It doesn't altogether eliminate the peer reviews, but it certainly kind of redefines the role of peer review. So it'll be interesting how that plays out going forward. And if peer reviews actually end up going away, because it's basically now, optional. So keep an eye on that. Obviously, revising terms and conditions, that's been a hot topic for months. This executive order is basically telling federal agencies they have 30 days from August 7th to go back and review all their current and existing awards to determine what needs to be amended with this new termination for convenience language. And basically, what that is stating is this new language. It allows for termination of convenience if priorities change. So, and this is important because basically what they're saying is if that award is not now consistent with the president's priorities, they can terminate it for convenience. So it's a big one. Existing awards can be amended to add in that new language. So that's one that we're obviously keeping a very close eye on. All right, let's go to the next slide. A couple of other things. There's one in here about needing to request approval for every drawdown plus written justification. So I've heard a lot of different things from national organizations and states on this because there are some states that are having to provide written justification every time they draw down. Other states are not being asked that. And so, it's kind of interesting how those things are happening. It's on one hand, it looks like it may be a red versus blue state thing. But can't say that for sure, but it certainly looked like it based off of some of the discussions that I've heard. Nasa, I see your hand up.
Thank you. So many questions.
I know.
My, I think first question is, what do you guys think about how this will trickle down to our subrecipients?
Yeah, everything's gonna have to trickle down. So if there are changes, yeah, I mean, it's most likely gonna trickle down. And I kind of wanted to talk about this kind of on this slide a little bit because there are obviously things that will have to trickle down. I mean, if they keep changing the uniform guidance and the terms and condition language on our federal awards change, that means our terms and conditions and our federal provisions are going to have to change, which you obviously have to pass down to your subrecipients. So, I mean, there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of things that could have a probably downstream impact. I don't know if I want to say negative impact yet, but it could.
There's going to be a lot of change regardless.
There's just a lot of change.
Yeah. And this is going to be a really good time as we start going through this. And as we start learning more information, is just sharing as much as you can with your subrecipients, just so that they're really aware that, look, things are changing, the landscape is going to be completely different, but these are the things that we now have to follow for our funding, unfortunately.
These are the things that keep me up at night.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, there was a mention in this executive order about here's the indirect costs again. I mean, they really are trying to, they want recipients of discretionary funding at the federal level be given to entities with lower indirect cost rates. They are trying to reprioritize that. They're trying to shift away from, just because you're an entity that's received a lot of federal funding in the past doesn't mean you should in the future. They're really trying to, especially when it comes to research and higher ed funding, academic funding, they're really trying to reprioritize, redirect things along that line. This third bullet is really interesting. The plain language requirements, on the first take, it probably makes sense, right? It's like plain language, seems simple enough. But um, when you think about it a little bit more, it really could limit kind of the complexities and the nuances that, applicants to federal funding have had in the past. And so, if they're going to go through and rewrite everything with plain language requirements and probably end up rewriting applications at the federal level, that could really limit um, the narrative complexity of what applicants can put on paper, and really not allow applicants to demonstrate those nuances. And so, it could absolutely have an impact on how things get funded in the future. So, obviously this last bullet here, I mean, there are administrative implications for pass-through entities like us. So this gets to your question. A lot of these changes you know, are going to have to be passed down to subrecipients and tier two subrecipients. And, when we think about restrictions on drawdowns, eligibility, the termination language, all of those things are going to likely have to be passed down. So, a lot to digest there. I think in the short term, a couple things I want to say is, because of this, this direction of having these senior political appointees in these federal agencies having to review NOFAs and awards before they go out the door. That's going to slow some things down. So, the NOFAs aren't going to be released until they go through that new review process. Agencies have to do that 30-day review of their terms and conditions on their award to identify if they need to add in the new termination for convenience language. The NOFAs are going to include some of that other updated information, like, compliance language around certifications on the drawdowns or the justifications. And so there's a lot that's happening in the short term. Longer term, it looks like, just a realignment of how grants are managed overall when you're looking at more executive, administration priorities rather than, funding for broader public interest mandates. There's obviously going to be a continued emphasis with this administration to defund certain types of programs, things around immigration, DEI, those things that, have already been pulled. The things like what happens with the peer reviews in the long term, we don't know. But that's certainly going to change program evaluation as a whole. So, and then obviously there are a lot of lawsuits happening. So, the state of Colorado is in the middle of a lot of these lawsuits against the administration. So, all of things which, we're keeping an eye on. So, there's a lot there. I see the chat going, but I have not been able to read anything there.
Yeah,
So,
it's been good.
um,
I mean, I just real quickly, Lindsay Cleland they have DCJ. She put in DCJ's drawdown justification statement. Wow, that was easy for me to say.
yeah, that's a
And
lot.
then Gabe said they use similar language with one of their EPA grants, but another agency is requiring them to submit all documentation with each request now, in addition to the narrative. So yeah, it's going to be a lot of work. It's going to take on a whole new thing. And
Yeah.
not just a quick mention, like this is one of the things that actually could slow down our progress with the GM 101 LMS because of the simple fact that there's so many moving parts right now that this is all happening while we're doing this. So that it's just because we're gonna have to add different pieces
Yeah.
to it, and it's gonna be a lot. It's gonna be a lot.
But rest assured, I mean, there are a lot of eyes on these things. So the
Yes.
OSC,
Absolutely.
obviously, We know you guys and your agencies working with your federal partners are keeping an eye on a lot of things. The governor's office is keeping an eye on a lot of things. You know, there are a lot, obviously the AG's office is heavily involved because, you know, we've had a bunch of lawsuits, or joined a bunch of lawsuits with other states against the current administration. So there's a lot going on, and things are changing rapidly, and which makes for craziness. But I guess we're here for it. So, um, whether we, you know, we really want to be or not, but we're here for it. So,
Right. Some of us still
you
have some
know,
more time until we have to retire or till we can retire. So
yeah, so
just kidding.
yeah, this looks like our next big project. So,
It,
you know,
right.
rest assured, we're keeping an eye on things, and you know, we will be timely in sharing things as they come down. So with that, I think we want to let's go to the next. This is kind of where we want to just have an open discussion with everybody, and you know, see how all of these things that are how they're impacting you, and how they've affected your programs, and what are you hearing from your partners, and you know, how are you working with your subrecipients in this time of absolute madness. So I'm going to stop talking for a minute, and if anybody else wants to jump in and just tell us kind of what's happening in your agencies, we'd love to just kind of have an open discussion now.
Yeah, and feel free to answer all of these
All of
questions. If you
them.
have another question, just,
If you're
actually, you know what,
shy,
Nellie, you're absolutely right. I am going to go ahead and turn this off because I know we've had in the
yes,
past some issues with
yes.
recordings. And so we are
Um,
gonna, and we want you all to be able to talk and share freely. So we will turn this portion
oh,
off.
hold on, Gina, real
Oh,
quick
yep,
before we do that. Let's go
yep.
to the last slide really quick and just
Yes, there
officially
we
do
go.
this, and then we'll go back.
Yes, so our next meeting, please join us on November 19th at 9 a.m. I will say I'm very sorry because in the past, somebody pointed out the fact that I have never put the time on there. So in our Swag Mag newsletters, I just assume you all know it's at 9 o'clock. So yes, 9 o'clock, November 19th. So we will see you then. I'm going to turn off the recording now.